What's going on, guys? We're back. We got a video. This is a new channel to us, but it says Ukrainian Azov FPV drones without mercy storm one by one Russian motorcycle troops. It's a mouthful. This is his channel right here. Check him out. I'll tag him in the video as well. But this should be interesting. Viewer discretion advised. You already know we're going to see people get droned to death. Real quick. Go check out our Discord. We have a ton of resources in there between physical fitness resources, mental health, gaming, movies, Ukraine news. We have other Azov soldiers in there. We've got recruiters in there. Not to mention all of our uncensored footage is in an archive over there in Discord for our members. So go check that out. I'll leave that link in the description below. But we won't drag out the intro. Let's check this out.
The incredible scale of the bike assault points to a deepening shortage of armored vehicles in the Russian military. Russian field armies have renewed their push on Pokrovsk, a fortress city in eastern Ukraine's Donetsk Oblast. But these armies are running low on healthy infantry and even lower on armored vehicles. Which is why some Russians, injured in previous battles, have limped into action on crutches. And why others are riding motorcycles across the mine-seated, artillery-pocked, drone FPV patrolled front line. On or just before Thursday, an unprecedented 150 Russian bike troops, reinforced by additional troops riding in soft-skinned, all-terrain vehicles, stormed positions held by the Ukrainian 14th Chervona-Kalina Brigade around Myrolyubivka, a few miles east of Pokrovsk. The insane bike assault ended in Ukrainian Azov FPV drones. FPV drones delivered a decisive blow against waves of Russian equipment and manpower, the Center for Strategic Communication and Information Security of Ukraine reported. Despite the scale of the assault, Ukrainian troops held their ground and repelled the entire attack with discipline and precision. The Ukrainian brigade reported heavy Russian losses, including at least 240 troops killed or wounded, 96 motorcycles knocked out along with 21 armored vehicles, 2 other vehicles, and 2 artillery pieces. It's standard practice, as the wider war grinds into its 4th year, for Russian regiments to send undertrained, unprotected troops on reconnaissance by force missions in the early hours of a planned offensive. These are ordered to advance towards where they assess Ukrainian positions to be, conducting reconnaissance by drawing fire. Nick Reynolds and Jack Watling explained in a recent study for the Royal United Services Institute in London. If the group encounters resistance with Ukrainian Azov FPV drones, Russian commanders assess where they believe the best lines of approach are, and in particular, where the boundaries between defensive units lie, Reynolds and Watling added. If Ukrainian positions are positively identified, sections are persistently sent forward to attack positions. Many of these recon troops walk into battle. Others ride on bikes or ATVs or in civilian cars and trucks. In that sense, the Myrolyubivka bike swarm wasn't unusual. What was odd was the scale. According to Reynolds and Watling, the recon probes usually involve no more than 30 people, sometimes supported by a single armored vehicle.
Holy shit.
The implication is that the recent bike attack was the day's main assault, not the pre-assault probe. If so, it was yet another sign that, having lost 15,000 armored vehicles in action since February 2022, the Russian military is struggling to fully equip its assault battalions. At least, that's what the Ukrainian Stratcom concluded. It's more evidence that Russia now lacks armor. And here, Ukrainian forces are pressing hard in the Dobropilya.
I do think the motorcycle assaults, what he's saying is they're doing this because of the lack of armored vehicles, which I'm sure does. Sorry. This motherfucker's been drilling for so long, dude. What are you doing, man? He's gonna drill through the roof into my apartment. So I'm sure Russia's struggling as far as the amount of good armored vehicles that they have. But the other reason that they use motorcycles is because they're faster, they're more mobile, they're cheaper. They just buy these cheap motorcycles from India and China. They're one-way trips. Throw two people on it and just tell, hey, go that way until you either get exploded. Sorry, guys. Fuck's sake. We good? All right. So they're more mobile, they're faster, and they're less of a target for, when there's a huge mechanized convoy plowing through the front. It's a big, big target, and it pulls resources. Ukrainians see it, and they pull everything, and they just blow it to shit. They don't do that as much when they see, 5 or 6 motorcycles with 2 people on them.
Sector, carving up Russian lines and closing the gates behind the now isolated groups. With hundreds of Ukrainian drones in the air, a third pocket of Russian forces has formed, larger than the other 2 combined, and time is running out for the Russian soldiers still trapped inside. Ukraine's troops have started advancing southward, pushing the Russians back and retaking key ground in and around Pankivka. This advance was made possible due to the intensive work of Ukrainian drone operators, working around the clock to spot and destroy every movement of the Russians. As a result, Ukrainian ground forces were able to push forward, and the 1st Azov Corps confirmed that Ukrainian units had fully cleared Pankivka. Russia tried to counter this by rushing in 4 infantry units and a Marine regiment, but Ukrainian tactics of striking reinforcements on the move are blunting every effort. Combat footage shows how successful Ukrainian drone strikes hunt down Russian soldiers, as out of 10 soldiers, only 1 survived long enough to surrender and was taken captive, while the 9 others were already destroyed on the approaches. Further footage shows how a Russian motorcycle assault group was intercepted and destroyed even before reaching the front line and being able to help. In another, a supply van was struck directly, erupting into a fireball along with the munitions, weapons, and supplies it was carrying. These tactics, coupled with Russia's habit of denying surrounded soldiers the permission to withdraw, have now produced a third pocket of trapped Russian troops in the largest encirclement to date. left without supplies or a way out. This has helped the noose to tighten around the Russian positions. And even though Ukrainian advances have already split the battlefield into separate cauldrons, the latest developments between Razin and Boykivka are making matters worse for the Russian command. This strip of land has become a lethal gray zone. Any Russian soldier trying to move through it is immediately spotted and targeted by drones. Ukrainian operators dominate the area, preventing resupply convoys or reinforcements from breaking in and even blocking Russian soldiers from pulling back. Colonel Valentin Manko, head of Ukraine's Assault Troops Command, confirmed that Russian forces near Dobropilya have been cut off for 3 weeks, and there are now 3 distinct pockets under Ukrainian control. With Ukrainian drones swarming overhead and artillery covering every approach,
Sorry, I was muted because of the drilling. I was saying, this guy, the narrator said, the Ukrainian Assault Troops Command. Like there's one person that runs all assaults. That was confusing. I was saying, what the fuck does that even mean?
these Russian formations,
Because every unit, every brigade, every battalion, every company, every platoon, they run their own shit. That, you know, there's not one guy up in fucking Kyiv saying, okay, assault here, assault here, assault here, telling every single person. I'm sure he has control of certain assets that he commands, but there's not one person that controls all assaults.
face the same fate as those in the first northern cauldron that was cleared already.
So this is obviously one of those videos where they just put a fuck ton of Ukrainian combat footage and chop it all together, or combine it, chop it up, put it all together, and then narrate over it with AI, right? But from what I can tell so far, they've hit. It's been pretty accurate, right? When they talk about Azov, they show Azov videos, which I respect. I hate when they're like, you know, 3rd Assault Brigade attacking this portion of the front, and the whole video is of Azov or of like Hartia or a completely different brigade. That's the shit that bugs me. So keep that in mind. What you see on screen is not directly related to what's happening here. Okay.
These developments, President Volodymyr Zelenskyy made a symbolic visit to the front, as a video from the Pokrovsk-Dobropilya axis showed him meeting soldiers engaged in the counteroffensive, presenting state awards and receiving briefings from Commanding General Alexander Syrsky. Zelenskyy used the occasion to underline the scale of Ukraine's progress in the latest counteroffensive operation, in which, despite tough battles, Ukrainian troops have inflicted the enemy with serious losses. Zelenskyy confirmed that 160 square kilometers have been fully liberated, another 171 square kilometers cleared but not yet consolidated, including 7 freed and 9 cleared settlements. During the battle for the Dobropilya salient, more than 100 Russians were captured, 1,322 killed, and another 1,134 wounded. The presented numbers match the evidence on the ground, where geolocated footage confirms Ukraine's steady gains, heavy Russian casualties, and dire situation for the Russian armed forces.
So what he's explaining now is we saw this a while back on deep state maps where the Russians found a weak spot in the lines and they exploited it and pushed like 30 kilometers deep into Ukrainian held territory. And there was like these two fingers right on the map that pushed into Ukrainian held territory. But this is when Azov Corps, the first Corps Azov, was dispatched, and it became very public, and they showed up, basically cut off these two fingers at the base, surrounded everybody, all the Russians and assets who pushed in these assaults, and systematically wiped them out. That's what he's referring to when he's talking about those statistics: 1,000 killed, 1,000 wounded.
Overall, Ukraine's multi-layer campaign around Pokrovsk is combining airstrikes, drone warfare, and persistent raids against Russian depots and supply routes. Ukrainian commanders have choked Russia's to sustain its offensives. Ammunition shortages, disrupted logistics, and depleted reserves have left Russian units unable to consolidate and even hold on to their positions. The result is more territory being retaken by Ukraine and more isolated pockets of Russian soldiers left to die. With 3 separate groups now encircled around Dobropilya, Ukrainian forces are well placed to continue their tactic of starving them out before moving in for the kill. For Russia, each attempt to reinforce these doomed positions simply feeds more troops into the Ukrainian kill zones. Step by step, the encirclements and steady counterattacks are not only reclaiming land, but also dismantling the very offensive the Russian command had hoped would break Pokrovsk.
So interesting that he talks about relevant information. Forgot that what that word was. He talks about relevant information here, which I like. The chop up of all the different footage is like sometimes it feels like the whole video is just AI. AI made the video, right? But that's what it feels like. But I like that it was accurate information. So the fact that they're talking about this Russian push and how the Ukrainian military has completely severed the prongs that pushed into Ukraine from the main fighting force of Russia is important to know. And I mean, we've seen this before in smaller scales. The Russians will push in, we'll come around the rear, cut off their logistic supplies and all their logistic routes, their supply routes, their reinforcement routes, and we'll cut that off and then just systematically hunt the people who made it into the Ukrainian held territory. That's exactly what's happening with this push, but just at a larger scale. And that's what will continue to happen to any Russian advances. It's they're not going to win this war. In my opinion, it depends on how you describe winning a war. Because in my opinion, Ukraine's won this war by far already. Just how they've been able to hold and withstand the force of Russia, the ratio of casualties and KIA, and basically the hurting that little Ukraine has been able to do to what used to be the second largest superpower in the entire world. That's a win in my book. But if you think winning is taking back all the original territory, or, you know, invading Moscow and killing Putin. Okay, that's not a W, but more realistic. That's not very realistic, right? Now, Trump did tweet the other day about him saying he thinks Ukraine has a chance to restore pre-war borders because of the hurting that the Russian economy is currently undergoing. But that feels like a stretch to me. That would be a lot. And if it did happen, it would take years, because it's hard to assault positions, right? And it would be like switching the cards up. Now, instead of defending like Ukraine's been doing, now we would be the ones assaulting more often, right? And trying to take the territory back on a wider scale. So anyways, that was cool. Check this guy out. I'll link his page down below. Check out our Discord. All the uncensored version of stuff is there. And like, share, subscribe. I love you guys. We'll see you in the next video.